Good evening to you all. Welcome to this pre-NATO summit meeting press conference in The Hague. We have a couple of statements, and after that there's room for Q&As. I would like to give the floor to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister Rutte, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much for coming. And together with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, today I had the pleasure to welcome colleagues from Albania, from Belgium, Lithuania, Norway, Poland, and Romania. We, as allies from different parts of the NATO area, have looked ahead at next month's NATO summit in Vilnius. And one thing is clear to us all. This will be a crucial summit, one that centers on the increased threat around the NATO area and the Russian war in Ukraine. In recent days, we have all watched events unfolding in Russia with great concern, and much is still unclear. But I refute what Putin suggested yesterday, that we in the West want Russia to descend into domestic chaos. On the contrary, instability in Russia creates instability in Europe. So we are concerned. These developments are further proof that Putin's war has achieved nothing but more instability. Above all, it has inflicted intolerable suffering on the Ukrainian people. And with that in mind, we need to stay focused on our goal, making sure that Putin's war against Ukraine fails. It's our moral duty because this is an unjust war. This is a war against everything we stand for: freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. And of course, the war is a direct threat to our own security, because if successful in Ukraine, Putin will not stop there. And so Ukraine can count on our unwavering support. And in Vilnius, we must take clear steps that are supported by all member countries. Steps that send a clear message to everyone, including Moscow. Ukraine's future and rightful place lies within NATO. And we will continue supporting that ambition. The Netherlands is taking responsibility in this regard. We are working hard to enhance Ukraine's air defenses, and we will remain committed to that goal, so that cities and innocent civilians will be protected from Russia's brutal missile attacks, now and in the years ahead. And when it comes to further shaping NATO's relationship with Ukraine, it's up to us to decide. To Ukraine and all the members of our alliance, not Vladimir Putin and not the Russian Federation. In that sense, Lithuania is an appropriate location for next month's summit, because Vilnius is a perfect symbol of what it means to choose your own destiny. After all, the path Ukraine is taking now is the same path taken by other countries on Russia's border over the past 30 years. Just look at where NATO stands today, with 31 member states. It's bigger, more relevant, and more united than ever. And hopefully, we will soon have 32, because our next task is to make sure Sweden becomes a full member as soon as possible. Putin's plan has backfired. With his ruthless aggression, he hoped to divide us. But now he knows we will continue to stand firm for our collective security, with a strong, credible deterrent on our eastern flank, and high levels of defense spending that will remain high across the entire alliance. This evening we had a good informal discussion, and I look forward to continue this in Vilnius. And now I'd like to hand over to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. Jens, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister Rutte, dear Mark. Thank you for your warm welcome, and thank you for hosting NATO allies here tonight. And it has been an honor to be your co-host here at this very important dinner, where we have discussed the preparations for the upcoming NATO summit. We all saw the events in Russia over the last days. These are internal Russian matters, but what is clear is that President Putin's illegal war against Ukraine has deepened divisions and created new tensions in Russia. At the same time, we must not underestimate Russia. So it's even more important that we continue to provide Ukraine with our support. And I expect that our summit in Vilnius in a couple of weeks' time will send a clear message of our commitment. The Ukrainian forces are now pursuing a counteroffensive. The fighting is hard, but they are making progress. The more land the Ukrainians can liberate, the stronger their hand will eventually be at the negotiating table. I commend the Netherlands and allies present here tonight for providing critical support to Ukraine. This includes your contributions to NATO's comprehensive assistance package and the Dutch and Danish-led initiative to train Ukrainian pilots on F-16s. At the summit, we will agree a multi-year program for Ukraine, and we will upgrade our political ties. This will bring Ukraine closer to its rightful place in NATO. During the dinner, we also discussed the next steps to strengthen NATO's deterrence and defense. We are putting in place new defense plans with assigned forces and capabilities and high levels of readiness. Yesterday, I was in Lithuania to visit Exercise Griffin Storm, which demonstrated that we can quickly reinforce the German-led battle group in Lithuania. And it also sent a clear message: NATO is ready to defend every inch of Allied territory. At the NATO summit, I also expect allies will agree on a more ambitious defense investment pledge, with 2% of GDP for defense as a floor, not a ceiling. Russia's war in Ukraine demonstrates that we cannot take peace for granted and that we must invest more in our security. So again, Prime Minister, dear Mark, it is a great pleasure to be here tonight together with you and the other NATO allies.
Thank you, Jens. I would like to give the floor now to the host of the NATO summit in Vilnius, the President of Lithuania. Gitanas, please, your remarks.
Dear colleagues, dear all, it's timely opportunity to be here in The Hague to discuss the upcoming NATO summit. Thank you, Mark, for your hospitality. The Vilnius NATO summit comes to the eastern border of alliance. This is symbolic at the time we are living. Since the NATO summit in Madrid, security situation in the eastern flank has only worsened. Russia deploys tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. Last Saturday, we all have seen the mutiny of the Wagner group in Russia. If Wagner deploys its serial killers in Belarus, all neighboring countries face even greater danger of instability. Under such circumstances, deterrence and forward defense is a top priority. New regional defense plans are of particular importance for us. Furthermore, these plans should be made executable as soon as possible. In Madrid, we agreed that battle groups will be scaled up to brigade-size units where and when required. The joint threat assessment clearly answers the question where. The Suwalki corridor bears crucial strategic importance not only for the defense of the Baltic region, but also to the whole alliance. As for question when, my answer is we needed them already yesterday. For us, an essential element of forward defense is combat-ready Allied brigade in place. Let me remind you about specificities of our security situation. Lithuania is between heavily militarized Kaliningrad and Belarus. So reliance on reinforcement only, no matter how fast, won't work in our case. For all that, we need an ambitious renewal of the defense investment pledge. 2% is the bare minimum, floor, not a ceiling. We need to invest more to strengthen our defenses, to deter threats, reinvigorate allies' defense industries, and to continue supporting Ukraine. Lithuania remains steadfast in increasing defense spending. In 2023, it has reached 2.5% of our GDP. We allocated additional 1 billion euros just for host nation support to ensure the best infrastructure for allies' deployments and presence in Lithuania. One more very important question we will discuss in Vilnius is the future of Ukraine and NATO relationship. Lithuania is a staunch supporter of Ukraine's membership in NATO. Ukraine is part of the Euro-Atlantic security architecture. We should agree on a political pathway for Ukraine towards NATO membership and make this pathway as simple as possible. We support the creation of NATO-Ukraine Council. The inaugural meeting of the Council could be held in Vilnius. Last but not least, I do expect that we will be able to greet Sweden as a 32nd NATO ally in Vilnius. It is still possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Gitanas. I'd like to give the floor to the President of Poland. Andrei, please.
Thank you very much. Distinguished Presidents, distinguished Secretary General, NATO, distinguished Prime Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I want to begin by expressing my gratitude to Prime Minister Mark Rutte for hosting us at this informal meeting organized just 2 weeks before the Vilnius NATO summit. We are all aware that it will be the key NATO summit given the security situation in Europe after the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Over the last 16 months, Poland has taken serious steps to strengthen its security and, by doing so, NATO and Europe's resilience in the face of the Russian aggression. We have made historic investments in our infrastructure, technology, industrial and military capacity. Additionally, we've deepened our engagement and alignment with allies and partners around the world. I appreciate that we can count on other allies in that matter. We are going in the same direction, that's safe and prosperous Europe and a peaceful world order. But at the same time, we know that there is still a lot to do with regard to security of the NATO member states, Europe, and rules-based global order and international law. During the meeting, I indicated 5 areas of major importance to us. They are related to challenges we have been dealing with. For Poland, it's vital to strengthen and further adapt NATO's deterrence and defense, ensure long-term increase in defense spending by all allies, support finalizing Sweden's accession to NATO, provide necessary assistance to Ukraine and bringing it closer to NATO membership, and develop a long-term approach on how to respond to Russian military, economic, and political threats. That is the backdrop for the NATO Vilnius summit preparations. Finally, I would like to stress that the meeting that we have had just was very candid, very in-depth and constructive. Thank you again, Mark, for that opportunity to meet and discuss the issues that impact our countries now and in the foreseeable future. Thank you very much.
Andrei, thank you so much. And now I give the floor to the President of Romania, Klaus Johannes, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Let me start by conveying a word of appreciation for Prime Minister Mark Rutte for hosting us. Thank you so much, dear Mark. We had the opportunity of a very constructive and open exchange of views in an informal setting in advance of the Vilnius summit. Of course, we have also discussed the events of last weekend in Russia, especially their potential impact on the management of the war in Ukraine by Russia. The Vilnius summit will be an important moment for further consolidating our alliance on many dimensions. First, we will be able to capitalize on the progress achieved in consolidating our deterrence and defense. In Madrid, we have clearly recognized the strategic importance of the Black Sea for the Euro-Atlantic security. The current evolutions are obviously demonstrating once again the validity of this acknowledgement. Russia is and will continue to be the most direct and immediate threat to the Euro-Atlantic security. Thus, we must be able and ready to further enhance our posture and continue to provide necessary support for Ukraine and for our most vulnerable partners, especially for the Republic of Moldova. Deterrence and defense is one major line of effort where we hope to see the full implementation of the Madrid decisions. The alliance needs a strong, long-term posture, a true forward defense capable to respond to all threats. Given our strategic location, Romania is particularly interested in further consolidating the eastern flank in a coherent and unitary approach. This means ensuring the necessary forces, structures, capabilities, and equipment, as well as the right command and control arrangements. Second, it is also about proving that we are capable and willing to back these transformations with a reinforced commitment to invest in our defense. The 2014 Defense Investment Pledge has been key in helping us advance towards a stronger alliance. It is now the time to move forward. Romania is ready to assume all necessary responsibilities. As a matter of fact, as I have already announced in Madrid, starting as of this year, the national defense budget increased from 2% to 2.5% of our GDP. Third, being effective as an alliance is also about working closer for the benefit of our partners. Ukraine remains at the center of our efforts. The summit must have a clear and substantive result for Kiev by advancing our political and practical support, including for the concrete, measurable progress of Ukraine's accession to NATO. Romania's support for Ukraine and for its aspiration to become a full-fledged ally is well known. We will continue to be a strong advocate of Kiev. It was in Bucharest in 2008 when the Allies decided that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. In Vilnius, we have to take this commitment further. It is a matter of responsibility and trust in our relationship with Ukraine, as well as a matter of credibility for the alliance. In Vilnius, we look forward for a meeting with President Zelensky, hopefully in the format of the new NATO-Ukraine Council. Fourth, we should not lose sight of our most vulnerable partners in the region, especially the Republic of Moldova. Its security and that of Ukraine are connected. And their security is interlinked with our transatlantic security. If they are stronger, our region is stronger, the Black Sea is safer, and then the whole Allied territory is safer. We should continue to closely engage with Chisinau, especially given the tremendous efforts this country made in support of regional security and stability since the beginning of this war. Let me conclude by restating our unwavering commitment for a stronger NATO. As a dedicated ally, Romania will continue to act as a responsible security provider in the Black Sea region. I am looking forward to the Vilnius summit and all its concrete results. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus, and thank you for also putting Moldova at the center of your remarks. And I think that was very, very wise words. So now I'd like to give the floor to the Prime Minister of Belgium, my neighbor, Alexander De Croo.
Thank you, Mark. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for this invitation. I think it led to a very good discussion we had over a very nice dinner. Dear Jens, would like to thank you also for your continued leadership. This Vilnius summit was going to be an important one. I think after this weekend, it is even more clear how important this summit is. I think over the past months, we've shown a lot of solidarity with Ukraine, necessary solidarity, and I think we can never show enough solidarity. I think that solidarity only has value if we continue that solidarity at a moment like this, and I think all of us have done big efforts in supplying for the battlefield, in supplying for a population that is really suffering, in preparing for the reconstruction, but also providing political support. And that is the reason why we're meeting here, is to see how we could provide that continued political support. It is clear that Ukraine one day will be part of NATO. I think that is crystal clear to everyone here. The question is, what do we do in the meantime? And in the meantime, we need to do two things. First of all, we need to provide a good political framework to make sure that we continue to have this rightful discussion together with our Ukrainian friends. Secondly, we need to provide the necessary security guarantees. And those questions by Ukrainians are obviously totally righteous questions. To finish, our meeting in Vilnius will be the first time together with our friends from Finland, and we're really happy to welcome them there. And I would hope that the next meeting will be a meeting where our Swedish friends will also be present. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Alexander. And now the floor is for the Prime Minister of Norway. Jonas, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister Rutte, and thank you for convening us. I'll be short. I come from a meeting of Nordic Prime Ministers together with Canada's Prime Minister in Iceland in recent days. We have discussed issues that touch on the ones we have discussed here. We are preparing for the summit in Vilnius to be a summit of unity, of the real strength of NATO. And a few points on that. First, I think we have to secure that there is relevance in our plans and relevance in our structure. I think we have done a good work, and I'd like to commend Secretary General for leading that work, updating our plans with our military staff. Then we need solidarity expressed on two particular dimensions. Across the eastern flank, and events that we have seen in recent days underlines that necessity. We are on good way. On my way to the summit in Vilnius, I will visit Norwegian troops in Lithuania, where we are side by side with other allies providing that security. Then, of course, there is Ukraine, where I believe we are on track to come up with a strong message of support. There is daily support from our countries in terms of military support. Norway has adopted a 5-year plan to support Ukraine every year for 5 years, military, economic, and humanitarian support. We will reiterate that in cooperation with NATO allies, and Ukraine should be secured a path of further integration with NATO. And finally, as my colleagues have underlined, in Madrid last year, we agreed that Finland and Sweden fulfilled the criteria to join NATO. Finland is in its rightful place, and there is no time to lose to get Sweden also in line. It fulfills all the criteria, and Norway will do what it can together with allies to secure Sweden's place on this line of allies.
Thank you so much, Jonas. And now a great leader on the Balkans, but also a great leader in NATO. Edi Rama, please, Prime Minister of Albania.
Thank you, Mark, and let me say it's a special honor to be here with all of you, and also I cannot hide my admiration for you as a breaker of the stereotype about your country that is a place where you don't eat well. So congratulations about that, and jokes aside, I want to say that it's very inspiring to be part of NATO in these times and to see that the solidarity, the firmness, and the will to be with Ukraine all the way is unwavering. And whoever bets on the chance to break this solidarity and to divide NATO has lost and is going to lose till the end. On the other hand, I cannot but confirm what was said on Ukraine and want to use my little minute to add that we could also discuss about the warring situation in the Western Balkans, precisely in northern Kosovo, where some weeks ago, KFOR soldiers were hurt, and we very much hope that common sense will prevail and de-escalation will start as soon as possible, because every further escalation can bring to a catastrophic end, and we don't want to see a break within our region, which has done so well in the last years. And in the meantime, we want to see the EU-facilitated dialogue succeed, of course, with the full support of NATO, which is responsible for the presence of KFOR as an instrumental presence in these worrisome times. So, Mark, thank you again, and it's a big honor.
Okay, now we have time for Q&As, and the first question is for Simon Akern from NRK.
Yes, thank you very much. I have a question for the Secretary General Stoltenberg. Following the statement earlier by the President of Lithuania, does the new confirmed presence of the Wagner warlord in Belarus change NATO's security evaluation concerning its member states? And if I may, Mr. Secretary, could you let us know when you will let us know that you will stay on as Secretary General for a while longer? Thank you.
First, on the consequences of the mutiny or the events we saw in Russia over the weekend and over the last days, I think it's too early to make any final conclusions on the long-term consequences, including for NATO. But what we can say is that we are, of course, closely monitoring the developments, and we have already increased our readiness, our preparedness, and our military presence in the eastern part of the alliance. We will make further decisions to further strengthen our collective defense with more high readiness forces and with more capabilities to ensure credible deterrence and defense for the whole alliance. We'll make those decisions at the upcoming NATO summit in just a few days. What is absolutely clear is that we have sent a clear message to Moscow and to Minsk that NATO is there to protect every ally, every inch of NATO territory. And we do that through what we communicate, but also through our actions by, over now several years, significantly increase our collective defense and the way we invest in our shared security. So no misunderstanding, no room for misunderstanding in Moscow or Minsk about our ability to defend allies against any potential threat, and that is regardless of what you believe will be the final consequences of the movement of the Wagner forces. I think it's also actually too early to say exactly where those forces will end up and whether all of them will end up in Belarus. when it comes to myself, I have made my position clear many times. I have nothing more to add. I don't seek an extension, and that is what I've stated many times before.
Second questions for Anthony Deutsch from Reuters. Please go ahead.
Good evening. Could you maybe, this is for Secretary General Stoltenberg, maybe a little bit more detail about how concerned you are that Prigozhin has moved to Belarus and that the Wagner forces may follow him? And what assurances can NATO give to its members on the eastern flank who have been today expressing concerns about that move? What can NATO do to alleviate those concerns? Thank you very much.
So I just believe it's too early to make any final judgment about the consequences of the fact that Prigozhin has moved to Belarus, and that most likely also some of his forces will also be located to Belarus. It's too early to say, but we will monitor and we will ensure that we always are ready to protect and defend every NATO ally, and especially those allies which are now which are border countries to Belarus. This was also addressed in the dinner, and it just demonstrates that it has been a right decision of NATO over the last years, actually since the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, to implement the biggest reinforcement of collective defense since the end of the Cold War, with battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance, with higher readiness of our troops. And also after the invasion of Ukraine in February last year, we doubled the number of battle groups, and we further increased our military presence in the eastern part of the alliance. One of the neighboring countries of Belarus is actually Lithuania. I was in Lithuania yesterday and this morning, and I saw how NATO troops and German troops exercised on how to scale up the current battle group in Lithuania to a full brigade size presence. And also we saw the announcement of Germany as a NATO ally to further increase its presence in Lithuania. So we have the readiness, we have the forces, we have the plans, and not least we have the commitment and the resolve to deploy what is necessary when and whenever needed, to ensure that there is no misunderstanding about our ability to protect every inch of NATO territory. And we do that not to provoke a conflict, but to prevent the conflict, and that is a message we send to any potential adversary, of course, including Moscow and Minsk.
Next question for Anke Truijen, Nieuwsuur.
Question from Dutch press for Prime Minister Rutte and Secretary General Stoltenberg, and any other leader who feels the need to respond. Did you all agree today on concrete steps regarding Ukraine's NATO membership, and what are these steps? And will the Netherlands and other NATO members send more troops to countries on the east flank? I hear there is readiness and there is a will and hope, but will the Netherlands and other countries send more troops? Thank you.
Well, first of all, on Ukraine, I think the president of Lithuania already expressed that very clearly, but also President of Romania, that after Bucharest, we have to move further ahead. So we cannot just stick with the Bucharest language. So we are looking into decisions we can take at the NATO summit, which give a clear signal to Ukraine that their future is firmly within NATO. And we are now looking into very specific measures we can take. One of them being already mentioned in one of the introductions, this idea of having a NATO-Ukraine Council, where auf Augenhöhe, so really at the same level, you would work together between the 31 NATO countries and Ukraine. These discussions will continue over the next 10 days and 2 weeks, leading to, I firmly believe, agreement at the summit in Vilnius. On your second question, we all agree that we have to do 3 things. We have to look at Moldova, the Black Sea, and generally the eastern flank. And when I say this, that also means that we all have to be willing to assess again what we are already doing and can we do more. We have not taken decisions on that. But clearly this is something which is on the table, and Germany yesterday or today made a clear announcement on their commitment towards Lithuania, which is a commitment others could follow, but again, decisions have to be taken.
I can just underline what Prime Minister Rutte just said. The consultations are ongoing. We are preparing the upcoming NATO summit, where I, as Mark Rutte, I'm absolutely confident that we'll find common ground on how to address Ukraine's membership aspirations. But let me just remind you of the following. Allies agree on a lot, also when it comes to membership for Ukraine. All allies agree that NATO's door is open, and we have demonstrated that by inviting Finland and Sweden to join the alliance. All allies agree that Ukraine will become a member. We have stated that again and again. And we also agree that it is for the NATO allies and Ukraine to decide when Ukraine should become a member. It's not for Russia. President Putin does not have a veto on NATO enlargement. But then the most important thing all allies agree on, not only in words, but also in deed, and that is that the most imminent, the most urgent task now is to ensure that Ukraine prevails, that President Putin does not win in Ukraine, because unless Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation, there is no membership issue to be discussed at all. So we focus on that, the military, the economic support. All the allies standing here have provided significant support to Ukraine, and I'm absolutely confident that at the summit we will also step up and sustain our support for Ukraine. We will also move forward on the membership issue by strengthening our practical support for Ukraine, including a multi-year program for transition from Soviet-era equipment to NATO standards and procedures, strengthen the political ties with the NATO-Ukraine Council, and then also, of course, find a way to address the specific way forward on the membership issue.
Next question is for reporter Urbanek van Polsat.
Good evening, Grzegorz Urbanek from TV Polsat. I have a question for President of Poland, Andrzej Duda. I'd like to ask you about main issues, expectations of Poland before upcoming summit in Vilnius. I precisely think about Polish security, the security of our borders, and the presence of American soldiers in Poland. Thank you.
The adaptation of NATO to the upcoming situation in Belarus is one of the main issues I hope we will discuss during the NATO summit in Vilnius. And in my opinion, it requires also our decisions. It's difficult to say if we make those decisions during the upcoming summit in Vilnius, because it's rather difficult process, but I hope that we will discuss this issue. We heard those questions of ladies and gentlemen here about the Wagner's group in Belarus and the presence of Mr. Prigozhin in Belarus. In my opinion, this is really serious and very concerning problem, and we have discussed, and we have to make some decisions, very strong decision. It, in my opinion, requires a very, very, very tough answer of NATO.
Thank you. Next question is for Skodrani from Albania. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Denada Shkodrani, Albanian Public Television. Prime Minister Rama, you compared the situation in North Kosovo with Donbass in Ukraine. Did you discuss the situation with Mr. Stoltenberg and the other colleagues, and what can be seen as the solution? Thank you.
Thank you. No, just to make it clear, I simply stated that the perspective of the creation of little Donbass in the middle of Europe because of further escalation is a real threat, and we all have to do what we have to do to prevent it to happen by encouraging, on one hand, the dialogue, bring it even in a higher level in the European Union with the support of US, and on the other hand, by making very clear through NATO that KFOR is there to guarantee the full integrity and also stability in case of any disruption that can happen exactly because of irresponsible de-escalation. So this is my concern, and we shared it, and I felt in Brussels, I feel here, that everyone understands that it's time to act and to not allow this spiral of absurdities to take down what we have built so far with the help of the European Union in our region.
Thank you. Final question is from Isopescu from Radio Romania News. Please go ahead.
Thank you. For Mr. Klaus Iohannis, you talked about Moldova as a vulnerable partner. Is going to be Vilnius a different? Is going to bring Vilnius a different approach between NATO and Republic of Moldova? Could it be a new kind of assistance? And for Mr. Stoltenberg, sorry, the next meeting between Turkey and Sweden, could it be the decisive one for Sweden to become a NATO member? Thank you.
The Republic of Moldova is an important preoccupation for me. Yeah. And as I found out today, it's not only me, it's all of us. The situation in Moldova is dire, and I think it's our responsibility to find ways to help Moldova to enhance its resilience, its entire situation. And I'm very glad that the colleagues share this evaluation, and it would be really great if we had remarks on these issues in the conclusions at Vilnius.
It's still possible to have a positive decision on Swedish membership by or on the Vilnius summit in a couple of weeks. And I spoke with President Erdogan about this on Sunday. And my message is that Sweden has implemented and delivered on the agreement that was made between Finland, Sweden, Turkey at the NATO summit in Madrid last year. And now the time has come to ratify and to complete the accession process for Sweden. This will be good for the Nordic countries, for the Baltic region, and for the whole of NATO, including Turkey. We agreed to convene a new meeting of Finland, Sweden, Turkey, and NATO. This meeting will take place in Brussels next week. I will share the meeting, and it will be a high-level meeting with the foreign ministers, the chief of intelligence, and the national security advisors. And the purpose of that meeting is, of course, to make progress so we can have a positive decision by the Vilnius summit on Swedish membership.
Thank you all for visiting the press conference.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.